Have you ever wondered what it's like being an accountant in today's world? Maybe you've seen some videos on TikTok or on Instagram and you think, I could do that, right? Or you're just kind of curious as to what the life of your accountant looks like. Then stay tuned because this video is for you. Well, hey there. I'm Kimberly Ferguson, CEO and founder of Emerald Expectations Accounting. I'm so happy that you're here. The Emerald Corner is a place where life and business meet. So I want to share with you the process of running a business, but while maintaining a life with your loved ones. So in today's video, we're going to have an accountant tell-all session, okay? I'm going to tell you what it's like and give you a little bit of a sneak peek into being an accountant in today's world. So I know some of you might think this is completely boring, but I'm sure some of you are curious. I know there's a lot of day in the life stuff that goes around on social media, so why not talk about what it's like to be an accountant, right? So first of all, what does it take to become an accountant? So it depends on what kind of accountant that you are. If you aren't sure of the different types of accountant, then I'll go ahead and link to a video here that shares a little bit about what the different types of accountants are, okay? But let's say that you just want to be a bookkeeper, right? So if you want to be a bookkeeper, what kind of education is required? And the short answer is none. No education is required to be a bookkeeper. So that's why when you're trying to choose a bookkeeper for your company, you need to be a little bit more careful when you're trying to vet them and figuring out what kind of credentials they have, what kind of experience they have, what kind of, what kind of skills are they actually able to bring to the table for you. For example, there are so many programs out there that are just like, hey, stay-at-home mom, or hey, 9-to-5er looking for a side hustle, start a bookkeeping business in 60 days. It doesn't matter if you have any experience or not. You can do it, And so literally when I say anybody can start a bookkeeping business, I mean anybody can start a bookkeeping business. There are no criteria, there's no education, there's no nothing, literally, no training. So vet your bookkeepers. And then if you meet a bookkeeper who has a lot more credentials and their price is a little bit higher than the other bookkeepers that you're talking to, you can probably guess why. They've actually had some training, they've actually had some education, they've actually had some experience. These are the things you want. So even though it might be a little difficult for you, a little bit more money for you to spend, I recommend doing that for sure. So then there is like a tax preparer. So a tax preparer could be multiple different things. If it's just straight out a tax preparer, they usually have to take some sort of a course, like if they're through H&R Block or Liberty Tax or something like that, they probably have to take some sort of a tax course, but it's very basic. Like it's probably like a 4-week course maybe. So they don't have a ton of experience or a ton of training, but they do have some. It's more than a bookkeeper, right? So next we have the enrolled agent. As some of you know, I am an enrolled agent, so I know a lot about this particular credential, right? So an enrolled agent, there's not necessarily any educational requirements. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to do accounting credits or anything like that, but you have to have a lot of tax know-how. So the enrolled agent is a tax expert. So they're actually credentialed through the IRS, and they have to take and pass a pretty extensive 3-part exam on regulations, individuals, and businesses in order to become an enrolled agent, or they have to be an IRS agent for a certain number of years. And lastly, they actually have to pass a background check, get fingerprinted and all that fun stuff in order to get credentialed by the IRS. So there's a lot more to becoming an enrolled agent than just a typical tax preparer. And there's a lot more that they can do. So an enrolled agent can do pretty much anything in the accounting industry. They can represent you for an audit. They can do your bookkeeping. They can do your tax returns. They can do, just about anything. The only thing that an enrolled agent cannot do is auditing. So if you are a public company, or if your state requires that your financials are audited, an enrolled agent cannot do this. So keep that in mind. And then the big one that most people know is the CPA, right? So a CPA is a certified public accountant. They are actually certified by the state, not by the federal. So they have to work on a state-by-state basis, and they get a license from their board for the state, right? And they have to have a bachelor's degree. They have to have typically a master's degree, although I think technically it's just a number of master's level accounting courses, they actually have to have experience. So another CPA, somebody who's already licensed, has to work with you for a year or the equivalent hours of a year, and they have to sign off and say that you kind of know what you're doing. And then they have to take a 4-part exam because they have auditing, which we don't have as an enrolled agent, but they have auditing, so they have a 4-part exam. It's also pretty extensive. There's a pretty high failure rate on the first attempt, but if you are a CPA and you're certified by your state board, then you've taken the 4-part exam, you've gotten the education credits, you've gotten the experience, and all that fun stuff. And fun fact, I am actually qualified to sit for the CPA exam. I just don't know if I want to. I gotta go back and forth because I, can do everything that I need to do in my business without the CPA. But at the same time, obviously, as you probably know, the CPA is the more recognized credential out there. So maybe I'll take it someday when I have some more time to refresh myself and study for that exam. But obviously, you can see why these last few different types of accountants are going to probably charge a little bit more than the lower tier of accountants. So like a tax preparer or bookkeeper, they don't necessarily have any education credits. They don't necessarily have any extensive training, any of that stuff. So an enrolled agent and then a CPA, these people are going to charge more. So keep in mind, you usually get what you pay for when it comes to the accounting industry, right? So if you're paying a higher price, that means you're getting a higher caliber, you're getting a better service, you're getting more education and knowledge, etc., right? So what are the real problems when it comes to being an accountant in this day and age? I would say the number one problem is that everyone's a bookkeeper. And I kind of touched on this a little bit when I talked about the credentials for becoming a bookkeeper and how there are none, right? But also with QuickBooks and some of the other software out there that kind of make it easy to do it yourself, everybody feels like they know what they're doing and they can do their own bookkeeping. But the problems that I see, if I could show you the files that I work on and share with you the issues that I've seen, they are so many in number. It's kind of like QuickBooks gives you enough to be dangerous, and so it makes you feel confident, like I can do my own bookkeeping, right? And then you do, and then you end up with a messy file. You end up with, who knows what payroll tax penalties. I've seen $100,000 payroll tax penalties because people didn't know that they had to file and pay their taxes because they thought QuickBooks was just doing it for them. And unfortunately, that's not the case. So a lot of these do-it-yourselfers end up coming to people like me anyways, because something has gone terribly wrong with their file and they just can't figure out how to fix it. So it's, great if you're really small to do your own bookkeeping, and I'm all for that. I actually have a do-it-yourself program where I kind of help teach people how to do it. But once you get to a certain size, you're making over $100,000, say, for example, then it's probably a good idea to look into hiring a bookkeeper or someone to help you with all that so you don't end up having that huge mess that has to be cleaned up. So the next thing I would say is that TikTok and Google means everybody's an expert. And I love, all of the resources that are out there on Google and YouTube and, whatever, right? I think that they're all great, but a lot of the times people think that they're fact, and that's not always true. Like, you still kind of have to, I hate the term, but you still kind of have to fact check the things that you find on Google or in TikTok or on an Instagram video or whatever. You have to actually go through and make sure that there's a basis to back up the statements that they're making, right? And a lot of people don't do that. I mean, the good news is that when someone comes to me, for example, and says, hey, does this apply to me? Then it's great because I can just say yes or no. This does not apply to you. Or I can say, yes, it would apply to you, but it's a lot more complicated than they have in this video or whatever, But the problem is the people who don't come to us, and say, does this actually make sense? Is this a legitimate thing that I can do? They just do it and then they end up in trouble. You know what I mean? Like, they end up with big penalties. They end up with using strategies that didn't apply to them or things like that, and they have to kind of go back and pick up the pieces. And that's frustrating for me because I'm such a people person that I'm like, no, don't do that to yourself. But I know that it's hard and it's a challenge sometimes to account for the extra expense, especially when it feels like all of the costs are rising nowadays, right? So I know it's a lot, but I definitely think that, especially when it comes to like legal stuff, accounting stuff, I don't know, development type technology stuff. Like if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not really confident, then you're probably going to end up in a bad position eventually. So as you grow and you're able to fit things in your budget, you should do that. I would say probably the hardest thing, not necessarily the biggest thing, but the hardest thing is that everyone thinks that we should just share our knowledge and do our services for free. And the biggest one is with tax planning. So there is so much in free materials out there on different types of strategies that you can take advantage of, especially as a business owner, right? And so because all this stuff is out there for free, people think that you should give it to them for free. Or a big one is that you're preparing my tax returns, so you should go through and make sure that I am, minimizing my tax liability. And there's some extent to which we can do that. Like we can make sure that we're accounting for all of your deductions, but it's a completely different thing to go in and make sure that you're minimizing your liability, right? Like, how are we implementing strategies? What kind of deductions, credits do you qualify for? Like, that's actually a lot of work and a lot of research that we have to do. I mean, off the top of my head, I might be able to list out a few different tax savings opportunities for you, but to say you qualify, to say how much you could save, to say if it's worth it for you to do it is a completely different story. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation and a lot of research to make sure that all that stuff is true. So to make sure that we can give you the full image, the full picture of what's going on here in your tax situation, it's pretty difficult to just do off the cuff, So we actually have to spend a lot of time, spend a lot of resources sometimes making sure what applies to your situation. For somebody to come to us and want us to give that away for free, it's pretty frustrating. It'd be kind of like going to a car dealer, and asking them to give you your car designs. Like, can I have the blueprints to make my own car? And they're like, sure, if you want to pay for the blueprints. Like, we spend a lot of time and money developing these and learning what works and what doesn't work and going through all the nooks and crannies and making sure we have all the right tiny little pieces and everything works together in a perfect and seamless way. And now you just want us to give it to you for free. That's not how it works, right? So unfortunately, that's something that's very misunderstood about the accounting field, is that piece, particularly the tax planning piece, is something that should be done for free. So if you have a tax preparer and you think that they are doing strategies for you and they are making sure that you are paying the least amount in taxes, I would just probably ask about that, because it is most likely not the case. So another big thing, which I don't know how well known this is, but the accounting industry is actually dying. Okay. And it's not because the need for accountants is dying, because there is a huge, huge need for accountants, especially with the way that people are going into business. Like, more people than ever own businesses, right? And this is crazy. And so more people than ever need businesses. So we need more accountants than ever. But the demands from people that we work with, the fact that so many people think that our services should be free or much lower priced, and just the general capacity where there are so many people who need it, has made so many accountants leave the industry. And not only are there so many accountants leaving the industry, but there aren't very many people coming in to the industry. Like, if you look back at 20 years ago, how many people wanted to be an accountant versus now on a college campus, that number is so small. We are not replacing the number of people who are leaving the industry with new blood. That's not happening. The average amount of time, last I heard, that people spend in the accounting industry is only like 10 years. That's crazy. So being an accountant nowadays is actually very challenging. And it's not that other industries don't have challenges, right? Because every industry has challenges. There's nothing, it's just the way that it is, and that's fine. But, everybody's an expert. So many people want things for free, and there's a lot of just general pressure with deadlines and all this other stuff, and the capacity issues where there are so many people wanting our services and not that many people providing the services. It leads to this issue where we just don't have people who want to be accountants anymore. And it's unfortunate because it is a good field to be a part of in general. If you're able to, communicate boundaries and say that these things aren't for free and, give realistic expectations, actually communicate with your clients, because we all know that accountants aren't necessarily the best at communicating. I know. We're not usually known as very people oriented. That's why you go into accounting, because you like the numbers, right? So all this to say is being an accountant nowadays is very challenging. It also is very rewarding. So don't get me wrong. I'm not just saying there's nothing good here, so don't do it. It's not the case, but it's sometimes hard to see the forest for the trees, right? And so if you happen to know an accountant that you love, for one, stay with them because it's so rare anymore that people actually love their accountant. But for two, I hope this helps you to kind of appreciate all of the work that they do for you and all of the time and effort that they have put in just to becoming the accountant that they are, because it is a huge process. It's kind of a long journey. And especially if they own their own firm, that added pressure of being a business owner on top of just being in the accounting industry is huge. So hopefully this will inspire you to thank your accountant today if you have one. And if you don't, I hope that you will try to find a good one who can help serve your business and all of the needs that you have as you continue to grow. Well, what do you think? Did I leave anything out? Is there anything that you're like, just stop whining about? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for spending just a few minutes with me today. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I will see you in my next video.